Sup Gloomers, Rage Badger Gaming here, and today we're going to be doing another Gloomhaven revision, this time on the Tinkerer class. The Tinkerer is a very popular but also very maligned class, and there's been so many complaints, and even if you go to like Board Game Geek polls and other people's tier lists that they've created, Tinkerer is definitely on the lower side or the most complained about in terms of overall balance. So what we want to do today is fix it up. Thank you to our patrons for voting for this video. If you want to vote for this and other videos, be sure to check out our Patreon and be sure to subscribe for more Frosthaven and Gloomhaven content. So like the Brute video, we're going to start talking about what is the Tinkerer. Now, the Tinkerer actually is a large hand size range support class. Because it has a large hand size with no mechanic of relying on using it, what this means is it affords you situational losses. So to every scenario, you should be bringing multiple losses in hopes that they can be optimized for that scenario. And because you're support and ranged, you will likely be keeping at range and as well as enabling, healing, and supporting your allies. Now, this is either in the form of like healing, removing poison, or helping them draw cards out of their discard or even their lost. And that's some of the cool things you can do. Some of the heavier crowd control, like a non-loss range stun, is one of the best parts about the Tinkerer. He does so much quite decently, but he's never really great at anything, although of course he's better than all the other classes at healing, but everyone knows that the healing doesn't scale very well in Gloomhaven, so it's not necessarily a good thing to be really good at. The Tinkerer does a lot of things very well. At level 1, it's actually pretty balanced, but as you start to unlock more items with prosperity, the Tinkerer can't really do a lot with those items as compared to some of the other classes. And as you start to unlock higher level cards and perks, some of the Tinkerer perks just aren't as thrilling. His non-loss attacks are very weak. And even then his loss attacks, the highest is an attack 4 until like level 3. And then you have a single one-off attack 6, which some other classes by that level could actually non-loss be able to do every so often. It's just not necessarily a great thing. Although some people think, well, how can we fix the Tinkerer? Summon scaling or healing scaling is one way to fix it, but we can see that in Frosthaven we're not having scaling heals and we're not having scaling summons. So we're going to stick with that theme, but also Frosthaven added more handy nifty perks and changed attack modifier decks to be more of a standard size instead of just having some that are like super thin like the Scoundrel or the Mind Thief, or super fat like the Triforce or the Brute. So we're actually going to normalize the Tinkerer's attack modifier deck, give him a few new really cool perks, and change a lot of his more higher level cards. Additionally, some of his perks, since we don't want to change the cards he has available to him, so you can actually use this, just make this change and play it out of your box, we're going to stick with with those perks that are available, including Rolling Fire. Now, that's something I want to talk about, is the Tinkerer uses ice, but can infuse fire pretty easily, including a perk, but it actually can't consume fire. So it's like, why is this perk something that it just can never use? Are you supposed to just, hey, if someone wants fire, I can sometimes give it to you if I draw a rolling? It's just not very well designed. But what we could do is redesign the Tinker to have a fire theme, which kind of fits it, and just change a few of the cards. And I think that will ultimately bring the Tinker a little bit more of cohesive in design, but also better mechanically playing, more fun, and ultimately more effective. So let's just jump into the revisions. So for Harmless Contraption, we're only changing one little bit. When the summon dies, every adjacent enemy suffers 1 damage and you infuse fire. This is one of the ways we're going to allow the Tinkerer to infuse fire. At low levels, unlike some of the other classes that we introduced in Jaws, there's a lot of non-loss ways for them to infuse elements and use them. The Tinkerer, for this theme, we're largely going to be focusing still on losses to get fire, with other ways later to give it more reliably. So just giving the decoy, which is already decent, being able to usually soak up 2 to 3 hits at low levels, then also soak up 2 to 3 hits and then also blow up and give you fire, I think gives it just a little bit more of an edge to make it a little bit more competitive. We're going to just rename Ink Bomb to Incendiary. And we're going to make it infuse fire instead of dark. Ultimately, I think Ink Bomb is pretty well balanced, but we're just trying to keep the theme here. Proximity Mine is an okay card, but I think if we're going to be adding a perk later about traps, which we'll be talking about, and trying to stick with the theme, we're going to make the mine explode and infuse fire when it explodes. So a lot of these are pretty small things that give it the fire theme, and the buffs will be coming, trust me. Enhancement Field now consumes fire, so we're going to make the attack worse. So it's an attack 2 instead of an attack 3. But if you consume fire, it's an attack 3 wound at range 3. And Enhancement Field's bottom is the same as before, but its aura increases to range 2 if you consume fire. This means that Enhancement Field, a lot of people never use the top attack that often anyway, but now giving it a much better option to be able to wound things is nice. But that bottom aura, it's more versatile and better if you can just improve the aura, but you need to have fire in play. So we think that's a pretty fair trade-off. And last but not least for level 1, Volatile Concoction needs ice, but the Tinker has no way of, creating ice. So you have to find, at low levels, you need to have a Mind Thief or a Spellweaver infuse ice for you, and then you use it. We don't like that. Also, Volatile doesn't seem very frosty, but it does seem very fiery. So we're just going to change this card, change the ice to fire. Pretty small change, but with all the other changes, it feels like now the Tinkerer, at least at level 1, has a far more cohesive design. And like I said, level 1 Tinkerer never really felt so far off. A lot of people are still like, hey, we've got really competitive cards like, Net Shooter, which is still strong, Stun Shot, which is great through so many levels, and so on and so forth, to the point where we didn't really need a lot of changes to these. So we're actually going to be bumping some of the level 2 through 2 and up cards now. I already like Stamina Booster for the level 2 Tinkerer. I don't think it needs too many touches, but Disorienting Flash, the only thing we're going to change is the top now infuses light and fire, because it creates a big boom. Light you're not really using, but it is a flash. It is a loss, so you can stun 2 things, but also at least giving some elements in play might make it a little bit more useful for your group. Tinkerer's Tools. We're making it to where the top trap now deals 1 damage to all adjacent enemies whenever you disarm a trap. Or if you burn fire in the process, 2 damage instead. This isn't that much better than the Tinkerer's Tools, but ultimately it was kind of competing with, the level 1 Scoundrel cards, so we wanted to make it better. Also, giving it some fire interaction makes it more fun too. Crank Bow, we're changing the bottom and the top. The top is the same as before, but if you're shooting at someone who isn't adjacent, for every unused point of range, you get that much Pierce. This should help at least, deal with some of those particularly high shielded opponents where you can just Crank Bow, delete them. And also you can, if not, it's still a very strong attack. In the bottom half, we're changing to just doing an attack 2 at range 4. This gives that idea of, hey, you've got a Crank Bow, you're shooting, but it gives the Tinkerer at least some range damage at the expense of being able to effectively move for that turn. So I think this will make the Crank Bow a little bit more appealing, even though I think the Tinkerer's Tools being able to, blow up or create traps, I think will be also strong supported. I think this level is a little bit more appealing to people without actually completely breaking the class. Dangerous Contraption. We're just going to make the top half, every time your little minion attacks, it infuses fire. So this will, if you did notice, hey, you're creating a lot of elemental interactions with fire. If you want a more reliable way, create your summon, have it attack 2 every turn and give you fire every turn. Easy mode. And we're gonna make the bottom half consume fire after you do the move to do an attack 2 at range 2. So it is, because seriously, just a move 4 on bottom is a really weak high-level bottom. So we didn't want to make it too strikery for the Tinkerer. So saying, well, if you have fire in play, you might be able to have another attack 2 while moving, which doesn't really make it too overpowered. Microbots. This card sucks. So we want to still keep the top half kind of where it was before. So heal 5, range 3, target 2. That's so much more healing now, and I feel like this would kind of at least make the top more appealing. And the bottom half, we actually have move 2 loot at low levels. So high is this, move 3 and loot 1 as a loss? Let's just remove the loss. It's the same thing as before, so you still can move and loot, but now you can keep the card. I don't know why this was a loss to begin with. That was so weird. Anyway, that's all. I think that's enough to fix Microbots to make it more competitive. And I don't think anyone would say, oh no, this card's overpowered. It's fine now. It's not overpowered. It's just it's balanced. Gas canister, we're going to change to be 5 damage, so you create a 5 damage and muddle trap, which is way more appealing, which actually some people are like, that might be too powerful, but you have to drop a trap, get it into, get an enemy to walk into it. So, and then it infuses fire when it explodes now. I think for a non-loss thing, if you can find ways to get push-pull or whatever enemies into that trap, or at least get them to walk around, this is still worth it. I don't think this... No, I think that this... I feel much better about that. I'm not really feeling like the gas canister is necessarily overpowered. And for the auto turret, we're going to consume fire to add a second target, because a heal 3 on bottom actually isn't really strong for such a high level card. So we're going to leave it there, but say, hey, if you... Again, we're trying to keep with the fire theme. If you can burn fire, you can do another heal 3. Which isn't really going to, again, break that card, but 2 heal 3s with 1 bottom action is still, for a conditional bottom, is still very strong at that level. Jet propulsion. I'm just going to remove this card. No, actually I'm not going to. We're just going to completely reach my... Like, what? Did anyone actually play jet propulsion? Like, I feel like so few people use jet propulsion because it's a level 8 card. The top is you move summons, but you don't have a lot of summons. So you give up a turn to move some of your summons, and all your summons are losses and you have no way to get them back. Of course, you could use items with it, but yeah. So you move them, and the bottom half is a lost jump. That's it. No other special things. Just you jump a bunch, like 8 hexes. Okay. I mean, this is. I don't like this card at all. So we're changing the top to, we don't care about summons anymore. I'm just making it attack 3, range 3, target 3. Jet propulsion, maybe this is like a bunch of rockets. And the bottom half, we're still sticking with the theme. Jump 6, which is good, and we're removing the loss. So at the very least, you've got a good multi-attack range, so you can apply some damage. And at the bottom, you still have the jet propulsion, boom, fly across the room. It's not 8, but at least you're not losing it. So for perks, we're largely only revamping, we're only removing 1, and then we're adding a few of the Frosthaven non-attack modifier perks. So first, the remove 2 plus, we're going to be removing the add 2 plus 1s. Those are kind of boring and not great. Like, hey, here's some plus 1s. I know the removing minus 1s is also kind of boring, but it's too strong, and we're going to just leave those in there because those did make it into Frosthaven. So the rolling fire perk is just really weak. So what if we said replace 2 plus 0s with 2 rolling plus fires? That makes the perk a lot better because it makes your deck more reliable, and at least it keeps the cards that you have in play. Plus, you might be using fire more often with the new cards. And then the rolling muddles, you replace 1 plus 0 with 3 rolling muddles. Now you still have to add 3 rolling muddles to your deck, but you removing +1 +0 is an improvement, especially if you're using the new Frosthaven rules for rolling modifiers. I think both of these will be more appealing. So ultimately, your deck is the same as it was before if you didn't take the 2 plus 1s, but just 3 less +0s in the deck, which is not bad. So let's get into the non-attack modifier perks. Whenever a trap is triggered or disarmed within range 3, you may deal 1 damage to the triggering enemy or an adjacent enemy to that trap, and then infuse fire. Now, you have a lost trap and a non-lost trap at level 1, and then 2 more traps as you level up. So you have access to 4 different ways to create traps, 3 of which are non-lost, so you can constantly drop them into play, possibly use some of your pulls, or maybe allies, or even just trying to screw with and monster behavior to get them to trigger it. Then you can apply a little bit of extra damage and get some of that fire more reliably with this perk. It is conditional, but it only costs 1 perk and can potentially add up to more in a scenario than just removing a -1. Whenever you rest, after recovering your cards, you can discard a card to perform a heal 3, range 3, affect 1 ally within range action. This is good because at the very least, first off, your extra stamina, if you're like, oh no, I've recovered cards, now I'm down to 11 or 10, and then you have to discard 1, and you're like, this cycle is now possibly affected by me losing a card. But the Tinkerer is one of the classes that can afford to discard a card for action economy. So this effectively gives you like a free level 1 top action, but you have to be able to rest and have an ally within range, and then you have to discard a card. So it's good for action economy, but it is cheap at the only 1 perk, and I think that this will help the Tinkerer have a little bit more of that healing build if you wanted to go more support, because you could always like say, hey, I don't need this card. So it improves your versatility by at least saying, well, I rested, but we need to heal that person. So I'm going to heal 2 from my long rest, or even a few short rest. But you can say that person over there heals 3, and I'm going to lose this thing that I'm not going to need this rest cycle. And the last perk costs 2 perks. So it's a bit heftier, and only once per scenario. So it costs 2 perks and once per scenario. So it's a big cost. But once per scenario, during your turn, if you have a lost card in your lost pile that's a summon, you can immediately recover it and play it for its summon action. So if you were like, hey, you know what? I had that like contraption that was doing attack 2 every turn, but I lost it. Boom. Once during the scenario, get it back. And now you've got that body of, that can take some hits with itself and still be performing attacks every turn. So I like this as a perk, but this in another class, some classes would see this and go like, oh, I'm taking that, because some of the classes summons are just really, really strong. But giving the Tinkerer 1 more summon revival per scenario at the cost of 2 perks and no action cost, I think isn't game breaking because of the guys he has. Even the Killbot, which is still, it's actually pretty decent, isn't going to be so overpowered to have it twice per scenario. And ultimately, I think it'll also, it feels more Tinkerer-y with like, oh no, my bot blew up, I'm going to rebuild it. So even from a fluff perspective, I really like this. So, which of these Tinkerer changes did you like the most, and would you have changed any other cards? I try to be more concise and keep it, instead of just completely revamping the whole Tinkerer, but if you have your own suggestions, please let me know in the comments below. Remember to like the video if you liked it, because it really does help. Thank you to all of our Inox patrons. You guys are all amazing. I love all of you. You do so much to support the channel. I didn't realize so many people loved us, and you're all awesome. Thank you guys, and thank all of you for watching.